In today's episode, I talk about the strangest inks that I've ever used, what it would take to make a Goulet pen, and moving on up. Well, hey there, Brian Goulet of GouletPens.com, and today is episode number 178 of Goulet Q&A. These things just keep on coming, don't they? It's kind of an important one because I'm making a big announcement today. If you've looked at our blog at all today already, you will see that we made a big announcement, and I want to elaborate on it just a little bit in video form today. Basically, the Goulet Pen Company is going to be moving. We're going to be moving our offices to a completely new location. And now this is a big deal for us because, you know, we're not the same small mom and pop only store that we were back last time we moved. Well, no, last time we moved a completely different building. This would have been in 2011. And, you know, we had me and Rachel, and we had 5 others on our team back at that time. We moved it. It was out of our house. We had the business in our garage. It was like a 500 square foot garage, and we moved it to a 3,000 square foot suite. Well, over the years, we ended up moving. We took over additional suites. The building that we're in right now, it's 3 different suites that we've taken over. It's about 12,000 square feet, which is not small. It's not small to pack. It's not small to operate. But we are moving to a larger space, mainly because our lease was coming up anyway, and we had to think, like, what are we going to do for the long term? We were looking at signing a new lease. Would we be able to continue to function and operate where we are, or would we need to look for something better? My mic is doing weird things. And so what we've determined is that, you know what? We want to make a conscious effort to continue to grow, continue to move forward, and so we need a bigger and more functional space. So we're moving to a building that's about twice the size, a little less than twice the size of what we're getting right now, which is large and very intimidating, and it has been a work in progress. We actually started the process of looking for the building in January of 2016. So this has all been going on. We were having conversations even before that about what we might do. So it has been a huge work in progress. Literally, we've hired a designer, and we've gotten into space intentionally designed. We've been doing a construction build out. You know, we had a broker. We had to go see all these different properties. One of the biggest constraints we had was parking, believe it or not, and bathrooms, because we have so many people per square foot. Because, you know, in our area, typically it's a lot more manufacturing, you know, buildings and stuff like that, warehouses and stuff. We have an office warehouse combo anyway. So we're gonna be moving, and we've kept all this under wraps from you guys, and I'm kind of just letting the cat out of the bag now because everything is locked down as far as dates go, and I have stuff officially to share. Things were fluctuating so much with all these different things. I didn't want to talk about it so long and then have it just be delayed and delayed and delayed, because things were delayed and delayed. But now it's pretty firm that we are going to be moving the weekend of August 9th, which is a Wednesday, through August, you know, 12th, 13th, which is a Saturday, Sunday there. So we're going to have everything happen kind of towards the end of that second week in August. And it's going to be a very busy time for us. So there's some logistical things to work out. I spelled it out pretty clearly in the blog post, but of course you might have additional questions you can ask here on YouTube comments, or you can ask on the blog. You know, one thing to note about that is we are going to continue to take orders during that time. So while we're in the process of actually moving during especially that Thursday and Friday, you'll be able to place orders and kind of reserve the products that we have. But they're going to be in transit, so we're not going to be able to actually fulfill them until the following Monday. So we're going to be, you know, we're not going to have expedited shipping and stuff like that for those couple of days. We're going to try to maintain the rest of our functionality in terms of being able to process orders, not fulfill them, but process them. And we can do order changes and all that kind of stuff. And then we're going to try to have phone and live chat and stuff in some capacity during that time. But of course, we're going to be in flux between 2 locations. It's only about 10 minutes away, so it's not a huge, you know, travel distance that we're having to go, but we do have a lot of stuff. So we've got a moving company, we've had to coordinate all that. We have a moving coordinator, we have a designer, we have a construction crew. It's a pretty elaborate thing that has stretched me personally quite a bit, because a lot of this stuff has been outside of my comfort zone and stuff that I've never done before. This is all like on top of like doing normal business and like having 2 kids and all this kind of stuff. So for me and Rachel, and for those of you that have really been following us, you know, Rachel's had a variety of health issues, and we've had all kinds of other things going on in the last year or so. It has been a very stressful but very exciting time for us. So I'm finally excited to be able to share with you all that this has kind of been going on for us pretty heavily, especially the last 8 months, 10 months or so. And the construction really has been like the last 90 days. So it's been really kind of impending, but we are gonna be moving to that new space, and it's gonna be really exciting. It will not, and I need to clarify this, it will not be a brick and mortar store. We are online only, and that's in our mission statement. We are not looking to expand into a brick and mortar location, particularly the area that we're in. I do not feel that it would be a strong strategic move, nor is that the way that we wanna go. We want to have a space, and we've designed a space that is going to serve you all better in the online capacity that we are doing already, and that's the way we're going to continue to move with it. So more details to come on that, and you can check the blog post on our website for more details as well. But that has been no joke of a project on top of everything else. On top of that, so some logistical things kind of around that time, you know, because we're going to be pretty busy, pretty distracted, the video output, the blog output and stuff is going to be diminished, and we are going to not be doing any product launches the first couple of weeks of August, because we are going to need to be kind of make sure that we're like super caught up. That way we can move everything appropriately to the new space. So, you know, it might be a little quieter on the home front here for us in this first couple of weeks of August. Don't be surprised if that's the case. And then the DC Pen Show is going to be happening the weekend before we move. Woo! So that should be an exciting time for us. Just make sure that if you are planning to go to DC, you know, find me. I'm going to be completely frazzled, but we will be there. We're not working a booth or anything. That's not our style, but I do like to go and just kind of hang out and meet people and stuff like that. So I will be going to that. I'm gonna be so exhausted, it's not even gonna be funny. I'm gonna be exhausted from the show and then go into a whole week of moving, and then through the move, and the next week, I'm just gonna be a mess for the month of August. So if you see me less, don't be surprised about that. And if you've been following like my personal Instagram or any of that, like I just haven't been posting to my normal frequency because frankly, I've just been so dang tired. All right. Some other exciting things that we've had going on here. You might have seen a blog post that we had from Edison Pens earlier this week. That was because they had a machine that was down. Talk about being, you know, Murphy's Law kind of situation. You know, Brian Gray, I've been talking with him back and forth. So we are out of stock of our delphiniums right now. We're gonna be out of stock probably for another month or so, because they've had the machine down. It happened while they were on vacation. You know, they've had their own stuff going on. He gave full details in his blog post, if you can check it out if you're interested. But basically, we're gonna have a gap of those because they're just behind. They're just straight up behind. So, you know, it's kind of a bummer for us, but at the same time, we're gonna look to bring those pens back, you know, around probably late August is the time frame that we're looking at if all goes well for the Grays. And then we'll keep you in the loop on that as we get closer to. And then we had a blog that went out this week, in a YouTube video called the Top 5 Work Appropriate Inks. So I kind of followed up that on and decided to top favorite inks video that I did years ago. And I thought I'd do favorite work appropriate. I know it's been a question that's come up in Q&A here before, so you can check that out there. Jenny did a good job cutting together some B-roll for that. So nice little fun video, you can check it out. Then we got a couple new products that we have this week before I get into the questions. One of them is the Nock Lookouts. I'm excited for these because Nock is a pen case that we've had on our radar for years. We started to carry the Brasstown and the Sinclair, but the Lookout was the one that I always thought was the coolest, personally. You know, it's a flap over pen case. It holds 3 pens, so you can get you know, 3 pretty good sized pens in here. You can fit up to like a Mont Blanc 149 in here pretty easily. And then it just kind of flaps over like this. It's more affordable, it's only $25, so it's more affordable than the other Nock cases even. And made of this, you know, ballistic nylon, really, really durable, American made, really cool stuff. So you can check those out. It's available in the same colors that they have the Sinclair and the Brasstown in. So it's got the coffee amethyst, the, what is this one called? Peacock and coal. and the Raven and Aqua, and it's got like different color on the inside, which I think is pretty cool. So that's fun. Glad to have those finally with Nock. I've been looking forward to carrying those for a while, and good things come to those who wait. So that's kind of cool. Another thing that we've got is Visconti came out with a new Van Gogh color called the Vincent's Chair. So you can see there, it comes in this nice little triangular box, which is kind of cool. And you know, it's got a picture of the painting of Vincent's chair. And you know, I know yellows and like these mustardy green kind of colors are not everybody's flavor, but if you happen to like this one, the pattern is really cool. This one happens to be particularly yellow, but it matches the painting. It's pretty neat. You know, popular pen, very wet writer. The fine and the medium are not that indistinguishable from each other. They're just both really wet writing pens. So you can check those out on our site. Have them available now if you want. And then we have the Aurora Green Flex. Aurora 88 green is the next color that's come out. They're a limited edition. We do not have many of them, but green is the next color. It's a nice solid green. It's a nice like racing green. It's really, really good looking green. It looks very similar to the color green that they have on the Ypsilon, if you're familiar with that one at all. So if you're interested in that, you can check it out. 14 karat flexible gold nib on that one. Pretty decent amount of flex too. A little toothy. It's got a little bit of tooth to it. It's not quite as buttery smooth as maybe like the Falcon or something like that, but it is a solid writing flex pen made in kind of the old world fashion. And then around the topic of product launches, I'm going to have something to announce to you next week. I'm not going to say exactly what, but it's a new exclusive Goulet pen that is pretty cool. It is actually 3 different pens. 3 different finishes, I should say. So I'm not going to go into any more detail than that, but be on the lookout for that next week. It's something we've been planning for quite a while, and it's kind of an interesting material. So I would like to get your opinion on that once they finally come out, but be on the lookout for those. All right, let's get into questions for this week, shall we? I'm going to start off with the pen and writing questions. This is from William Y on Facebook. What are your thoughts on putting in a little bit of liquid soap into flex pens to stop them from railroading? My Pilot Falcon seems to railroad a lot, even with Pilot ink, but a little soap will solve the problem immediately. Love to hear your thoughts. So I've heard of some people doing this. Basically, it's just adding a lubricant into your ink. You know, when you said adding it into your pen, what you do is you dilute it into the ink. That way you're basically increasing the surfactants into your ink and allows it to flow smoother. So, you know, glycerin is something else I've heard. Some people have, you know, pure glycerin around. It can be interesting to kind of fine tune the amount that's the proper amount so it doesn't, you know, completely gush out of there and won't bleed into your paper too bad. So it's a little, you're getting into kind of an experimental territory here. I've never really messed around with this too much, to be quite honest with you. You know, I haven't gotten into like altering my inks too much, but it's something that I have heard other people do somewhat successfully. So it might be worth an experimentation. Of course, the only thing is whatever you do it to, if you get the ratio wrong on your ink or you don't like it or it does something weird in your pen, you basically ruin that ink. So you got to be willing to kind of do that. But if you're willing to experiment a little bit, I don't know that you know, adding a little bit of lubricant, like so especially something like dish soap, is relatively harmless. So I don't foresee it causing any problems in your pen, other than it just is going to alter the flow, and you might have to kind of adjust for that. You know, if your pen is railroading, especially something like your Falcon, you know, it could be that, it could be some other things too. So I don't want you to necessarily go to thinking something's wrong with the ink or the pen. You know, there's techniques to using a flex pen. Like if you go slower, sometimes that can help. You know, these pens, they call them soft nibs. They're not flex nibs necessarily. So some people, you see videos and stuff online of people really flexing them out, and then you go to try it yourself and you're getting railroading, you get frustrated. Well, you got to slow down. There's specific techniques. It takes practice to really be able to get flex to work well, especially without breaking the flow and stuff like that. So, you know, just kind of be aware of that. Slowing down, definitely for sure. And then there is a limit to how much the Falcon can really handle in terms of flex, because it has this kind of a regular fountain pen feed on there. So if you're really flexing it hard, you're flexing it a lot, you're writing quickly, it's going to railroad because it's not supplying the ink fast enough through that feed as the nib is demanding of it. So just be aware of that as you're doing it. You know, increasing the flow of it is one way that can help more ink to kind of shoot down through, but you can also try diluting a little bit of water. Sometimes that helps too. It's an experiment thing. So if you want to do it, I say it's like a do-at-your-own risk kind of situation, but it's not something that I would say like, no, never try it. You're in an experimental territory there, but as long as you understand that, you could have a lot of fun and maybe find something that works better for you. All right, this next question is from Dylan K on Twitter. Could you do a comparison between Platinum Maki-e pens and Namiki Maki-e pens? Thanks. Also, the GPC team is wonderful. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I agree. This team is wonderful. Sure, I can definitely do that. So talking about Maki-e in general, I don't have a lot of Platinum Maki-e. I really don't. The Namiki Maki-e I have much more readily available, but the Platinums are a little harder to come by here in the US. But the one that I have regularly available is, well, this one was called the Modern Maki-e. I don't actually carry this one anymore. This is the only one I have in my personal collection. But we have the Kanazawa leaf Maki-e. So, but there's similar kind of techniques on those. And just a very simple kind of Maki-e pattern. So it's a black pen, it does a Urushi Maki-e, and the Maki-e is the technique of basically, it's a lacquering technique of using Urushi lacquer to create a design or a pattern on a pen. So this is a relatively inexpensive one, under $200. And then when you get up into some of the other ones, especially basically all of the Miki ones, they get very expensive. And the reason they're so expensive is because these pens are created by artists who train for years to do these very specific techniques that are, quite frankly, very difficult to do, and you're pretty much literally paying for their time when they do it. So you see more elaborate designs, you see a mixture of techniques where there's a greater degree of challenge in creating a pen design. As such, the price goes up, the larger the pen, etc., because it just takes more time, frankly. So usually the larger and more elaborate the pen you see, the more expensive it is, just purely because it takes a lot of time. And there's some element of raw materials, but it's mainly the artist's time. So there's a couple different techniques that there are with the Maki-e stuff. And both companies will use some of these techniques. It's debatable as to who does the techniques better. I think that I definitely see more Namiki Maki-e pens. I see more of them around. They're both Japanese companies, so they have artists, and they definitely both have artists that are at the company, and a lot of times they'll be kind of like freelance Maki-e artists that'll kind of go around to different companies and do Maki-e work. So I know that they've utilized some of those as well. So there's certain artists that kind of, especially in Japan, they get kind of like a fan following, and so certain artists may commission a higher rate just because they have more of a following of, a lot of them sign their specific pens with a signature, especially for the more elaborate designs. But literally of all that I have available is that Kanazawa leaf from the Platinum one, and that's it. It's under $200. Very simple design. It's very pretty, but relatively simple in terms of what Maki-e is. And the pen itself is not super heavy, but it is a nice writing pen. I think if you're going for a kind of a bargain price, I use that term with a grain of salt, but it's a bargain price Maki-e pen, I think it's a phenomenal pen. But when you get into the Namiki stuff, and I don't have like things to show you in every step of the process here because I don't personally have like one of everything in the Maki-e collection, nor do I keep a lot of them here. So the best resource that I have to get kind of a full breakdown is I did a blog post on Maki-e techniques that Namiki offers. And that blog post goes back to May 25th of 2016. So you can check that out. I go into kind of a full thing, I have a video along with it with examples. It's really solid, so I recommend you check that one out. But basically there's kind of three techniques. I mean, there's a lot more than three techniques, but the three techniques that I'm seeing on these pens, one is called the Hira, which is a flat Maki-e. It's the easiest to do. That's what you're seeing on these lower price pens, the Platinum Maki-e, the Nippon Art from Namiki. It's basically just kind of a single layer or maybe a couple of layers that are painted on. It's not like a three-dimensional effect or anything like that. It's a relatively simple pattern, and then they move on. And it's relatively quick for them to do, and they do it there. When you get to kind of the next level, you get to Togadashi, which is called a burnished. It's a burnishing technique. The pen that I have here, this is a Platinum Maki-e, but it has kind of this silver sword. It's a dragon and a sword. And the sword here is more of a burnished Maki-e technique. So it'll be kind of painted on like that, but it'll be a little glossier, might be raised just a tiny bit. And that burnishing, there's certain techniques they do that typically they use gold powders or silver powders and stuff like that, and they'll burnish that into there with different techniques. It's additional steps in the process. So that's kind of the next level. And then the higher level is called the Taka, and that means raised. So that's when you get into like a three-dimensional effect. That's where you actually start to see depth and dimension and things like that. And you can mix a lot of these techniques onto each other too. And depending on how they're mixed, that can make the pen more elaborate, more challenging and stuff like that. So you'll see that typically, especially on the higher end, when you get to the Namiki pens, you have your Nippon Art, which are the lower end ones. You have your Yukari, which is slightly bigger, and your Yukari Royale, which get even bigger and more elaborate, and that's where you start to see a lot of the Taka come in, and then you have your Emperors, which are kind of the biggest. And as far as Platinum goes, the only two that I really have here that we've ever really carried to any great degree is we have the, the Kanazawa leaf format, and then we have, this is, I forget the format, it's like the President, the Platinum President kind of size, or the, not the President, yeah, it's about that size. So it's not something we've carried a lot of. We carried a couple of these pens. I took one for myself just because I thought the Dragon with the Sword was sweet and I liked the matte black look, but it wasn't around for very long, so it's not very popular, not very well known. The Namiki ones are much more well known. They make them in larger quantities and stuff like that. And then the other technique you get into is the Rodin, which is probably one of the more popular and recognized, especially because the vanishing point, there's a Rodin, a couple different versions of the Rodin on the vanishing point, but that's basically just an inlaid shell, particularly abalone shell that gets inlaid in here to different techniques. So I have here a Yukari that is the Moonlight pattern, which I love dearly. That is with the Maki-e technique. So it's not so much that you have like Platinum, versions and Pilot versions. Of course, the model of pen is going to be different between the two. And I kind of just covered those a little bit. But the techniques can be used really kind of on either pens. And there's a strong correlation between price and the complexity of technique. But there's a lot more to this than what I have available now and what I can even show you here. So there's a lot of research you can do if you're super into that kind of stuff. Then there's a lot of research out there that you can do. And there's really good stuff written out there. A lot of good resources for this kind of stuff. One of the resources that I've used before, which I don't sell this book, but it's really good, and I should have grabbed it first. So sorry, it's gonna be a little awkward as I reach up here. I have some like special books up here that I can't actually fit them on my bookshelf here. But one of them is Fountain Pens of Japan. This is by Andy Lambrow and Masamichi Tsunami. And they have all kinds of pictures and stuff here and techniques. It's a very expensive book if you can get your hands on one. But if you go to pen shows, Andy Lambrow works table a lot of times at pen shows, and you can buy them from there. I bought this one from him, and it's got a lot of background about the lacquering techniques and stuff like that. That's what I should have done. I should have just shown you some of the techniques there. So there you get an example, some of the taka, some of the raised stuff, and it's pretty interesting. You can really fall down a deep rabbit hole just with Iroshizuku Maki-e pens. But if you're going to do so, be prepared to do a lot of window shopping or spend a lot of money, because none of it's cheap. None of it's cheap, but it's all incredibly fascinating, deeply rooted in history and artistry and tradition and art. It's really kind of cool. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight there for you. All right, I have a couple of ink questions here. One is from Nahnat on Instagram. What are some of the strangest and interesting inks that you've tried? I just watched Brian's video on Noodler's Blue Nose Bear and want to know if there are any other similarly weird inks. Yes, I have some weird inks that I like. It's not an exhaustive list, and it's certainly, some ones that I think are just, interesting to me. Maybe you would agree, maybe you wouldn't, but it's my list anyway. A lot of them are noodlers. I'm just going to give you a heads up. Noodlers tends to push the envelope and make a lot of weird inks, so my list is a little bit noodlers heavy, but I'll just kind of talk through each one and why I think it's kind of interesting. I think the first one on my list is Noodler's Blue Ghost. It's an invisible ink, and it's pretty dang invisible. In fact, I've gotten a couple of handwritten letters recently where they're written completely in Blue Ghost, and my black light is out of commission at the moment, so I can't even read the letter. So I need to get another black light. But anyway, it's really kind of interesting. You can only see it under black light, especially if you're writing on an off-white paper. There's just not a prayer that you're going to see. It's pretty cool, and it's bulletproof too, so it's water resistant and all that kind of stuff. Noodler's General of the Armies. It's kind of a little shifty, shady color of like a bluish green kind of ink. It has some neat halo properties. It does some really interesting things when you watercolor wash it. I know that ink has been fascinating some people recently. Noodler's Rome Burning is a really kind of a weird, fascinating ink. It goes on gold, but then when you wash it with water, it turns purple. So I've never seen an ink with that drastic of a color change when you wash it with color. So pretty fascinating. Good job, Nathan, on doing that one. And the story behind it is it's based on Nero from the Roman era, and it's very interesting kind of backstory as to why he did it. It's rather gruesome, so I'm not going to share it here, but there is a story to it. Noodlers also has an ink called Black Erase or Blue Erase. It's literally like a whiteboard ink. It's like an erasable marker ink. And what's interesting about that is he had created that years ago, probably 7 years ago almost. And he created that and brought it to the New England Pen Show. It wasn't really a hit, so he was going to discontinue it. But we were getting so many people asking us for it. We asked him if he would make it. And so he was making it. We had it as an exclusive for a while. I don't know that it's an exclusive for us anymore, so you may see it around out there. But we had it for quite some time. So kind of an interesting take on ink. Doesn't work particularly great on paper, but it's the only ink that'll work on a whiteboard. And then Noodler's Apache Sunset, of course. I love that. It's just a high shading ink that shifts color between like a red, kind of yellow, to an orange, deep kind of orange red. Very fascinating. Changes colors a lot. Very cool. Noodler's Bay State Blue. Of course, that gets a lot of attention on Fountain Pen Network and other various places. Hey, it is what it is. It's a very bright electric blue, kind of notorious for how you clean it out of your pens. It's a bit of a challenge to clean. It cleans with bleach, but it's still a pain to kind of clean. So it's best to dedicate a pen to it, especially an inexpensive pen. And then Noodler's Kung De Chang is really interesting too. I promise that's my last Noodler's one. But that one's really interesting because not only is the ink property kind of interesting, it's like a dusty purple that's permanent, but also just the history behind it. It was based off of the first purple ink that was ever made. So Nathan actually worked with, and the ink is named after the gentleman he worked with, to kind of recreate this vintage ink from, I think, the 7th century or something like that. I need to brush up on my my history lessons here, but he developed that a number of years ago, and it's a pretty cool ink. Another one I think is really fascinating is Rohrer and Klingner Goldgrün. I don't talk about this ink a lot, but it's like an olive green, which is kind of like, that's kind of an interesting quirky color, but it shades really intensely. And I just really like that one a lot. So it's not so much strange, it's just a bit of an offbeat color for what I typically go for, but I find it very appealing, especially because of the shading properties. Another one is one of my favorite inks of all time, J. Herbin Emerald of Chivor. Of course, you could basically lump any of the shimmering kind of inks into this category of just really interesting because they have glittering properties and different kind of colors that can go in there. But particularly Emerald of Chivor, not only just for the glitter effect that you have with the gold shimmer in there, but really for the ink itself too. It's kind of a teal that can really have a good red sheen to it, especially when you put it on the right type of paper and you put it down pretty heavy. I love that ink a lot, and I really think it's kind of very interesting. And then last one that I have for the list is kind of a whole line of inks, but the Platinum Classic inks. It's an iron gall ink, but it's really more of like a old school kind of iron gall flavor. So it's not as much like the Rohrer and Klingner, Salix, or Scabiosa. Those are pretty tame, but the Platinum ones, literally you put them on, not only do they have some decent colors, but you put them on and it's like within like hours or maybe even a couple of days, it'll like turn black. I mean, that's really kind of the tradition. That's why it's, that's where the term blue-black came from, was the tradition of iron galls was like a blue, and then it would turn black, and the term blue-black came about. And it does that with all the different colors. It has like a vibrant pink or like a yellow or something like that, but then it'll turn black relatively quickly because it oxidizes on the paper. So those are pretty fascinating, pretty interesting to play with. So nice little list there. There's a lot of other cool ones. If you have some that you can have on here, that's not going to be my question of the week this week, but if you wanted to include something in the comments about other inks that you think are particularly strange or interesting, I'm sure everybody else would love to read it and see it. All right, this question is from thelexlutz on Instagram. This is on the Iroshizuku post. Why exactly did they drop the price? I've been hearing different things, but mainly that the price will drop because the bottles are no longer handmade. Either way, I'm happy, but I'm still curious. Right? Anytime that a price gets dropped like that, and that does not happen often. So they used to have a list price of $35, and the list price has now gone down to $28. So that's a pretty big drop. So I think we used to have our price around $28, and now we are going to have it for $19.99. So that's pretty cool. $20 bottle of Iroshizuku ink. It's pretty awesome. You know, that puts it pretty competitively with any other premium grade ink. And those bottles are basically the reason why. That's what I was told by the folks at Pilot. I couldn't believe it when they first told me, like, oh, we're going to drop the price on the bottles. I'm like, okay, how much? Like 50 cents or whatever? And they're like, no. You know, it's going to be, what, like $7 or something? I was like, holy moly, that's awesome. So that's pretty cool. But you can definitely pick them up for more of a bargain now. They are available now, though we actually haven't seen them. They've got a pretty good stock of them. They went ahead and dropped the price, but they're going to clear out the stock, their old stock first at Pilot USA anyway. I don't know about the worldwide stock. And then they're going to start bringing in the new ones. I am told, I've not seen the new bottle yet, but I'm told that it'll be basically indistinguishable. That basically what happened, they were all being handmade, and there were some slight variances in terms of the depth of the little insert and stuff like that in the bottom. You know, there's some slight variances because of the handmade quality of them, but they basically took the handmade, you know, quality of it, and we're able to make it into a mold, and they're able to basically mass produce the bottles now because they've been selling so much Iroshizuku that they went ahead and invested in a mass run of these bottles. And I've talked to a variety of different like ink manufacturers and stuff like that about, you know, what are some of the reasons why ink costs what it costs, you know, because the ink itself, you know, is certainly a cost, but honestly, a lot of the cost and a lot of the distribution and stuff like that is the bottle. Because I'm not joking, like when I talk to some of these manufacturers, what they have to invest in new bottles is, it will blow your mind. I mean, I'm not joking. Upwards of 100,000 bottles at a time they have to purchase when they're doing these things, and that's a lot of ink. So that's why you see a lot of smaller kind of startup ink companies and stuff like that that will use kind of more standard generic sized bottles because they can buy bottles that are being used for other purposes. You know, Noodlers, for example, uses a somewhat generic looking bottle with custom labels on it because that bottle is relatively widely available and you can get them at a lower cost. When you get into companies that are designing, you know, think about like Caran d'Ache, Pelikan Edelstein, Iroshizuku, where the bottle is really a main feature of the pen, they're having to custom make those things, and it's incredibly expensive. So I think because they hit some threshold and they're able to now mass produce those bottles, that's why we're getting a price drop. So it's really a win all around. It's a win for us, it's a win for them. They're going to sell more ink because it's a lower price. It doesn't cost them anymore because they're buying the bottles cheaper. They're just selling more of it, and we're all getting to benefit because we're getting, you know, a better price. And I don't think, I'm told that it's not going to affect the quality or the aesthetics of the ink in any way. So I trust them. You know, if there's one thing about the Japanese, I don't believe that they would ever sacrifice quality. So I trust them with that, and I'm looking forward to seeing that. But that is pretty much the sole reason why I understand why it's being done. All right, I have a troubleshooting question this week. This is from aliaskiran on Instagram. I have a Pilot Decimo that I absolutely love, but sometimes it spits little droplets of ink when clicking it, like so, right? I saw it suggested online to not submerge the nib completely in the ink when filling to avoid getting into nooks and crannies that are hard to clean. So now I always remove the cartridge and fill that with a syringe. That seems to have done the trick, but now it's happening again. Is there something you have encountered, and do you have any further suggestions that might fix it? Naturally, I'd prefer the ink to land where I actually put the nib down rather than unintentionally decorating my paper with colorful splatter. Love the Q&As, keep up the good work. Well, thank you. I will do my best. Okay, so when you say submerging, you know, those who are not very familiar with the Vanishing Point, it's a different pen, or the Decimo. The Decimo is a thinner version of the Vanishing Point. I'm going to use a Vanishing Point for demonstration purposes. But basically, you are talking about a click retractable nib, which is not super common with fountain pens. The Vanishing Point really kind of stands alone in that respect. But it has this nib unit inside the pen that you completely remove. That's kind of unique. And it has this trap door inside here. And the trap door, when you click the pen, the nib comes out through it, right? So what you're talking about is when you're just using the pen in normal operation, you go to click it, and it's kind of spitting ink out there. I have actually never experienced this for myself. In the years I've been using Vanishing Points, I talked to Rachel, she uses them religiously, has never had it happen. I talked to my customer care team and I was like, have you guys ever seen this? And they're like, yeah, it happens every now and then. So I think it's something that does happen, but it's not like every vanishing point does this. So I think there's probably some like specific combination of environmental factors, the specific ink that's used, and maybe the technique that's used when carrying it or using it or something like that, that when everything aligns, you get ink splatter. So, the first thing I'll say is, I don't think it's shooting like out of the nib. And the way that you fill this pen is you remove the nib unit completely. You fill out of here, there's a filler hole right back here. It's all the way at the top of the nib where it meets the housing, and that's where you fill it. So when you wipe that off, there's really no extra ink around there. There might be a little bit up in the feed channel here, in the filling channel, but it's really not gonna be much. And I don't know that that's necessarily your issue, though it could be some contribution to it. If you are not familiar with the vanishing point and you are thinking that it's like another type of pen where you dip this whole section here, I've had people do this before, where they're very confused about how to fill it, and they try to dip the whole section down into the ink, well, that is probably going to cause you some issues. So just make sure that you're removing the whole front section and then doing that. If you're filling it with, filling a cartridge or whatever, or a converter or whatever with an ink syringe, and you're filling this part directly, and then you go in here, yes, you're probably going to have a period of time where you're not going to have the spatter because no ink has really made it into this part of the pen. I think what's causing the spatter is ink is getting caught into the trap door that's in the front of this pen. So if you have ink that's kind of sitting around here into your filling channel and it's coming out into your trap door, then when you click the trap door, it's going to spatter a little bit. However, since you have been using it and that happened anyway, even with doing the cartridge, ink syringe filling trick, I would say that's probably not really your main problem. I think you can, if you want, still like going with the cartridge route, you can, but I think you can go back to a converter and that's not really so much your issue. I think more of your issue is that you have ink that's chilling up in here. So what you want to do is you want to wash this out. And it's pretty easy to do. Literally all you have to do is take some water and drip it down in here. You can just run a faucet and just run it, a little bit more than a drip, just kind of a slow continuous stream. Get it in here, kind of shake it up a little bit and dump it out. You can do that. You can even, if you have your nib unit clean, you can kind of, get some water in here and kind of work the trap door a little bit. You really just want to clean out kind of that whole trap door area from any ink that may have kind of collected in that area. And if you do that and then you kind of let it dry out, there's going to be no ink left in that trap door. So unless more ink is getting in there, you have nothing that's going to be able to click out when you do it. I think that, like any other pen, when you have a pen that you are using on a regular basis, you're going to, I don't have anything that's a really good example, but I have a TWSBI Eco here that I have with Jeroboam Emerald Chivor, and inside this cap, it's like all green up in there because, if I'm using this pen or if I'm shaking it around or even just the condensation, I actually have been keeping this pen nib up and I've got tiny little drops of condensation inside this cap. And that's just going to happen because ink is water-based, it's going to evaporate a bit, and you're going to get some of that. If you're using your vanishing point, you get a little bit of evaporation, and you're carrying it around, and it's kind of rocking back and forth. It doesn't have a cap to go into. All it has to go into is that chamber where the door is. So you might get some of that spatter. So just whenever you see that spatter come about, just take apart the pen, wash it out a little bit, and then you should be good to carry on. I think that would mainly take care of your problem. I've definitely heard that some inks do it more than others, so you may just want to try a different ink and see if you still get the same result. It could be worth an experiment, kind of play around with it and see if that still does it. But I think that is what is going on. All right, and then I'm going to close with one other question here. I'm going to make it kind of a shorter Q&A this week. Is it shorter? What is my time right now? Okay, so it'll be a little shorter. So to close out one business question, this is from chudfumpy on Instagram. Chudfumpy on Instagram. I just love your name, so I'm just going to say it again. Chudfumpy says, Brian, you started off making pens. You currently supply your own nibs. Surely you must be itching to design and produce a complete fountain pen, the Goulet pen. Or would business etiquette prohibit such a venture? Wow. Good question that I did not read very well. The short answer is yes and no. Definitely, ever since I ever stopped making fountain pens, I wondered if I would ever make fountain pens again. For sure, it's definitely a different scenario now than when I was making pens back in 2009, 2010. So the biggest challenge that I have now is that if I was to get into fountain pens, they would be made completely differently. If I was to make my own pen, it would be made completely differently than what I made back when I was making pens out of wood. So it would almost kind of be starting from scratch. Yes, I would have some carryover knowledge that I would have to dust off the cobwebs in my brain, but there's a lot of stuff that I've acquired, in terms of manufacturing processes and stuff and machining equipment and stuff, just from asking questions and kind of, getting to know different manufacturers and stuff like that about just the general process of how it's done. The thing that I can say is that, oh man, is it a headache? It's such a headache to manufacture stuff. You guys just don't even understand. I mean, if you're in any line of manufacturing or industrial design or anything like that, engineering, you know how much of a headache it is. Just look at basically any pen manufacturer that's out there. Doesn't matter who, just pick one. TWSBI, Edison, Noodlers, whatever, Pilot, you name it. Visconti, Aurora. Everybody has a date that they set for when pens are going to be ready, which by the way is like 2 years after they've been developing the pen from the onset, if not longer. And pretty much everybody, their launch gets delayed because there are always problems. There's so many problems. There's problems with materials. There's problems with just the problems that come out you guys could not believe. You could not believe, and just the way that certain materials react, the way that certain things go, just like even the packaging that you come up with a pen, is great. And then when you ship it to a certain location, like the glue comes undone or something crazy. It's just like the headaches that come are far and wide. So I have a deep appreciation for all of our manufacturers for what they go through on a regular basis. And then really the good end result that comes up with most pens. So that's a testament to the dedication that pretty much most pen retailers or pen manufacturers have. But then certainly most recently with Edison, with the Delphinium, I mean, literally I'm talking to Brian and he's talking about like the equipment that went down and what is required. It's like some kind of motor, and he had to get a different motor, but what isn't exactly the same. So he had to get a custom made adapter plate to fit onto them. And this is all like, he's just coming off a vacation. This machine went down, he comes back, his production schedule is all backlogged. And then he comes to this thing and we're like, we want more Delphiniums. And he's like, my machine is down and I've got to do that. Oh my gosh, and the DC show's coming up and all this kind of stuff. So it's a bit crazy. And I get more insights to that into kind of the small manufacturing, if you will, from folks like, the Grays. But even from other folks that we've worked with, I've talked to them, at length sometimes about how they developed, whether it's Will at Tactile Turn or Karis Customs or Nathan at Noodlers, or as we're getting, more knowledgeable and familiar with some of our larger vendors, even like Aurora, Visconti, and Pilot, and some of these other ones, just understanding kind of what all goes into it. It's really interesting and it's fascinating to me. It's incredibly impressive, and it's entirely intimidating and overwhelming at the same time to like truly manufacture your own pen from scratch. Is surprisingly challenging. Now, there's folks out there that are doing it, like independent manufacturers, like, Edison, I'm thinking about folks like Sean Newton, you got like Carolina Pens and, Canalea Pen Company, and some of these who are like smaller, they kind of make a very niche line of products, and that's great. They make them kind of one at a time, very handmade, very manual, very laborious, and that's cool. That would be something that we probably could explore a little sooner than getting into like, the widely available mass-produced kind of stuff. I mean, the level of investments in custom machining and knowledge and really like knowledge about the engineering behind fountain pens and how they're made and feeds and all that kind of stuff. Most of the manufacturers that are around now, I'm thinking about like, Aurora and Visconti and some of these other brands, Pilot, some of these other brands have been around for a while. Like Lamy, these brands, they have people that have been working in these companies for decades that have literally just grown up in the pen industry, and it's just like a part of their blood. we don't really have that around here. So that would be an interesting thing to try to build. You know, but not that that's necessarily required, because you get brands like Noodlers and Twisby and stuff like that, where they didn't like necessarily grow up in these like fountain pen cultures, if you will, but still have developed some pretty amazing products. So it's definitely something that's on my mind. Of course, the move has consumed every resource, every spare resource that I've had in terms of energy, time, money, everything. And that's actually one thing I did not mention about the move that we're doing. I mentioned it in the blog post, but I didn't mention it here, but we're doing all the move on no debt too. Like that's something we saved up money for years to prepare for this, and we're doing it taking out no loans whatsoever, completely self-funded move. So we're really proud of that fact, and it's going to be pretty amazing building we're moving to too. So anyway, but it's a big effort, but part of the reason we wanted to move into a bigger space is so that we would have the option, because right now we are like crammed into the space that we're in now. Like when I say crammed, I mean we have like upwards of 3, 4, 5 people in one office. Like it's getting a little bit nutty, but that's something that's going to be much better in the new space. So all that stuff said, I definitely have kind of an interest, but I think like just coming out with like a really high quality custom fountain pen. The thing that I would fear is that the expectation for a pen that we would come out with would be so high that it wouldn't be fair to ourselves or to you all, because we do what we do really well, the retailing and the communication, all that kind of stuff. But I don't do manufacturing that well. I haven't invested that amount of time in it. It's not quite necessarily my natural skill set. I was a woodworker, a wood turner, but I'm not like an industrial engineer or anything like that. No one here at this company has that as their background. So we would have to go and kind of source that out and really make that happen. So whatever we come out with would have to be trial and error and quite a process to come up with something, unless we were to like really bring in some massive talent and some heavy machinery and make a big investment into it. What is more likely the case is, as we look to kind of do more branded products, if you will, would be to kind of partner up with people that do that for a living. You know what I mean? We are kind of already starting to do that a little bit. The Edison is a good example. It's called the Edison Nouveau because we did it jointly. Our blog at the time was Ink Nouveau, so we combined it, but now Ink Nouveau is not our name anymore. So Edison Nouveau is kind of just like its own thing. Anyway, but this is a kind of a co-branded pen that we do with Edison as an exclusive. When we get into something like the Conklin Nighthawk, that is a pen that we worked with Conklin. We have a Goulet nib on it, so we're kind of dabbling a little bit deeper into the co-branded stuff. It's possible that as we have more opportunities for that stuff in the future, that we could either go completely co-branded and like have the Goulet name on another brand name's product, and we really work heavily in designing it with them, but let them do all the deep and dirty manufacturing and engineering and stuff like that, because that's more their expertise, and they have the equipment and they have the people and all that. But if we really wanted to bring something in-house, that would be kind of like the next step even beyond that. So well, we'll see. It's not anything that's going to be like later this year or even next year probably. It would take a huge effort with lots and lots of time. I mentioned earlier that, most other companies that I've talked to, if they want to conceive of an idea for a pen, it's usually about a 2 to 3 year lead time before, from conception to, retail availability. So whatever, even if I made a decision today, like, yeah, we're going to decide to do this, it would be a long time before we would get into it. And, frankly, that's not something that I can really handle right now, when literally we're like 2 weeks away, 3 weeks away from physically moving our building. Not quite 3 weeks, 4 weeks away. But it's going to be an adventure to see what it is that we actually decide to do in the future. It's definitely something that's like, like a little bit kind of floating around back here, like, oh, Goulet pen, that would be kind of cool. But at the same time, I'm like, how in the world would we make that happen? It's just it's not as easy as it may seem at the onset, but I'm still fascinated by the process. So anyway, a little insight into the mind of Brian Goulet on that question today. My question of the week this week, and this is probably just opening up Pandora's box here, but my question of the week relates to the Goulet pen thing. What would you hope to see someday in a Goulet pen? You know, as far as features and color availability, price, like what would be your expectations? If you want some kind of like demonstrator flex pen with a vacuum fill that costs $4, you know, it's like, okay, that'd be good for me to gauge so I know where your expectations are. But I'm just kind of curious, like, you know, everybody talks about like, not everybody, but the people who have asked me like, are you ever gonna make a Goulet pen? What would that be? Da, 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 da. I'm curious to know like, what would you think that would be? What do you think that we should come out with that's kind of, you know, new in the marketplace that would represent our brand well? I'm just kind of curious. Something blue, perhaps. We'll see. Anyway, I'm kind of curious to see. I don't have any ideas at the moment of what that would actually look like. Though, I mean, hey, these Edisons with the different colors and the resins and stuff, I dig those. We do really enjoy picking those colors, the Edison Premieres. They are pretty awesome. Have a lot of fun picking those colors every season. All right, that's all I got for you this week. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it. You can talk about the couple of pens that I mentioned today on gouletpens.com. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already. Check out Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest. We're like everywhere. It's crazy. And we love it. We love talking to you guys and gals and just about pens everywhere that we can. So thanks for your feedback. Let me know what you think about the move, anything I've talked about here. That has been like the foremost thing on my mind for forever, and I haven't been able to talk about it. So I'm thrilled that it's out of the bag now because I don't have to like dance around it anymore. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. Have a great weekend and right on.